The German ration that doomed an entire army at Stalingrad. This sausage, this bread, and this chunk of fat were supposed to keep a German soldier fighting at -22 degrees Fahrenheit. Instead, they became part of the machine that broke Friedrich Paulus's Sechste Armee at Stalingrad. How can food destroy an army without a single shot being fired? Let's dissect the ration that doomed the Sechste Armee. In front of you is Erbswurst, pea sausage. It was invented in 1867 by the Prussian cook Johann Heinrich Grüneberg. One cylinder, weighing about 9 ounces, was meant to make 4 servings of hot soup. Shelf life, up to 5 years. The perfect army concentrate, Kommissbrot, the Wehrmacht's rye bread. About 1 pound and 10 ounces per soldier per day, dense as a brick. The soldiers called it Eisenbrot, iron bread. About 2 ounces of animal fat or margarine, roughly 540 calories of pure energy. On paper, it's fuel for the body in the cold. 3 components. On paper, 3,000 calories, and 0 chance of survival. Welcome to the engineering of hunger. My name is Alex, and this is the channel WW2 Uncovered, where we dissect the engineering of survival in the Second World War. Not heroic charges, not generals moving pieces on maps, but the things that decided the outcome of battles in 99% of cases: logistics, calories, degrees Celsius, and the seconds that ran out. Today we're going to break down the German ration as a technical system, a system that failed. 3 questions. What was it designed to do? How was it supposed to work in theory? And why were the engineers confident it would hold up? And where exactly, at what point, in what moment, did that system break, turning food into a weapon against its own soldiers? Because the story of Stalingrad isn't only the story of a battle, it's the story of how 250,000 men slowly starved to death, holding food in their hands that they physically couldn't eat. Let's start with the packaging. The German field ration of 1942 wasn't just food. It was a manifesto of German rationalism, a philosophy that built empires and won wars. Ordnung und Rationalismus, order and calculation. From the mid-19th century onward, Germany turned that idea into a system. Railroads running on minute-by-minute timetables, a chemical industry where every reaction was calculated down to the gram, military planning where every soldier was a variable in the equation of victory. And it worked. 1870. Prussia crushed France in 6 weeks. The secret: railroad logistics and carefully designed supply. 1914. The Schlieffen Plan nearly broke France in the first month of the war. 1939 to 1941. Blitzkrieg rolled across Europe. Poland in 35 days. France in 6 weeks. Each time, the German machine won not only through tactics, but through engineering the rear. This pea sausage, Erbswurst, was invented in 1867 by the Berlin cook and sausage maker Johann Heinrich Grüneberg. The story of its creation is classic Prussian pragmatism. After the war with Austria in 1866, the Prussian war minister realized the army needed a compact, long-lasting, nutritious product for field conditions. Grüneberg received a government contract and came up with a brilliant solution. What Erbswurst was made of: about 66% pea flour, the base and a source of protein and carbohydrates. About 6 to 10% smoked bacon, for fat and flavor. Palm oil or beef and pork fat, roughly 20 to 30%, for calories and preservation. Iodized salt, dried onion, spices, yeast extract, roughly 5 to 10% for taste and long shelf life. All of it was cooked, mixed into a uniform paste, and pressed into a sausage shape about 1.5 inches in diameter, about 4 3/4 inches long, weighing about 9 ounces. Then it was wrapped in tin foil or waxed paper. The density was like a bar of hard soap. Shelf life, up to 3 years without refrigeration. Its first real combat test was the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. Prussian soldiers packed Erbswurst in their rucksacks. One portion was dissolved into about 17 fluid ounces of boiling water, producing a thick, high-calorie soup of about 1,100 calories. The French weren't losing only on the battlefield. Their supply system was chaotic. The Germans, meanwhile, were eating hot pea soup every day, even out in the field. After the victory, Erbswurst became a legend. Armies in Austria, Hungary, Switzerland, and Japan bought it. Polar expeditions took it into the Arctic. Mountain climbers took it into the Alps. By the start of World War II, Erbswurst had already been in service for 75 years, across 4 generations of German soldiers. It was the most successful piece of military food in history, until the Russian winter of 1942. By the 1940s, Wehrmacht supply wasn't just an organization. It was a science. Nutrition institutes, laboratories, field trials. Every product was tested. Calories, digestibility, shelf life, weight, volume. Kommissbrot wasn't just bread. It was the result of years of scientific searching for the ideal military loaf. The story began back in the 1880s, when the Kaiser's army ran into a problem. Ordinary wheat bread went stale in 2 or 3 days in field conditions and became inedible. Military bakers experimented with recipes across Germany. By the early 20th century, they'd settled on an optimal formula. 100% high-grade wheat flour, the base for a dense structure. Salt, about 1.8 to 2%, about 0.6 to 0.7 ounces per 2.2 pounds of flour. Water, about 60 to 65% for a medium stiff dough. Yeast, about 2 to 3%, baker's yeast, sometimes with improvers like ascorbic acid in later versions. Fat and sugar, none, for maximum preservation. The key innovation was moisture content, about 35%. Regular bread sits around 43 to 45% moisture. It molds fast. Kommissbrot was kept near the lower limit, so the crumbs stayed dense and fresh as long as possible. Maximum density. The dough was kneaded for at least 20 minutes, squeezing out the air. Result? A 3.1-pound loaf, 1.4 kilograms, about the size of a brick. No big holes, solid, heavy, dense, with a thick crust. Bake for 50 to 60 minutes at 220 to 240 degrees Celsius, about 430 to 465 degrees Fahrenheit, with steam for the first 15 minutes, then continue drying until the moisture level reaches 35%. Shelf life, 8 to 10 days without refrigeration, at temperatures up to plus 25 degrees Celsius, about 77 degrees Fahrenheit. After a week, the bread turned hard, but it didn't mold and stayed edible. You could soften it in soup or coffee. In the field, Kommissbrot was cut with bayonets. An ordinary knife would get stuck in the dense crumb. Soldiers called it a brick for its weight and hardness. But it did the job. In Poland, in France, in the Balkans, Kommissbrot was the perfect solution. One 750-gram ration provided 1,600 calories, kept you full, and lasted a long time. But German bakers didn't test it at minus 30 degrees Celsius, about minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit. Dauerwurst, everlasting. Sausage Dauerwurst literally means long-keeping sausage. It's a dry-cured, smoked sausage, a method that came from the Middle Ages but was perfected by German butchers by the early 20th century. Ingredients: 60% pork, fatty cuts, pork belly, jowl, 30% beef, lean meat for structure, 10% pork back fat for extra calories, spices, black pepper, garlic, caraway, coriander, salt, 3 to 4%, the main preservative, saltpeter, potassium nitrate, for color and protection against botulism, fat content, 35 to 40%. That's crucial. Fat keeps the sausage from drying out and provides calories. The production process takes weeks, curing the meat, 7 to 10 days in a tub with salt and spices, stuffing into natural casings, pork intestines, 40 to 50 millimeters in diameter, then tying into links about 30 to 50 centimeters long. Resting 2 to 3 days in the cool at 10 to 12 degrees Celsius, about 50 to 54 degrees Fahrenheit, so the sausage sets. Cold smoking, 10 to 14 days at 18 to 22 degrees Celsius, about 64 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, using smoke from beech or oak sawdust. Drying, 3 to 4 weeks in a ventilated room. The sausage loses 30 to 40% of its moisture, becoming hard and dense, with a white coating of noble mold on the surface. The result, moisture content, only 25 to 30%. A typical sausage is 50 to 60%. Density, like hard cheese. Shelf life, up to 3 years at temperatures up to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius. Dauerwurst doesn't need refrigeration. You can toss it into a rucksack, haul it in a wagon, store it in a dugout. It doesn't rot, it doesn't mildew, it doesn't spoil. At room temperature, Dauerwurst can be sliced with a knife. With effort, but it can be sliced. 3.5 ounces, 100 grams, provide 450 to 500 calories, pure energy in a compact form. German soldiers loved it. In letters home, they often wrote, "Send more sausage." Dauerwurst was the pride of the German meat industry, a technology refined over centuries, quality without compromise. Everything calculated, everything tested, everything reliable. German staff officers were confident if the supply system worked in Poland, France, and the Balkans, it would work in Russia too. This wasn't naivete. It was logic backed by 80 years of successful experience. Now let's look at what exactly they created. The German field ration of 1942 was designed to solve a specific problem, to provide a soldier with 3,000 to 3,500 calories per day under conditions of active combat. The basic daily ration was divided into 4 categories. Category 1, the frontline full-issue ration, 26.5 ounces, 750 grams of bread, 4 and 4/5 ounces, 136 grams of meat, fresh or canned, 2 and 1/10 ounces, 60 grams of fat, 8 and 4/5 ounces, 250 grams of potatoes or vegetables, plus small items, sugar, salt, Kaffeeersatz, tobacco. Category 2 through 4, reduced rations for rear area units, warehouse personnel, and non-combatants, but the system's main weapon was the Eiserner Ration, the Iron Reserve. The iron portion became an expression of the German ideology of practicality. It was designed to contain the maximum number of calories in the smallest possible volume. The Eiserner Ration could not be opened without an officer's order. Open it on your own, and you faced a court-martial. This isn't food, it's insurance against disaster. Inside, about 8 and 4/5 ounces, 250 grams, of Erbswurst, pea sausage, about 8 and 4/5 ounces, 250 grams, of Dauerwurst, hard smoked sausage, about 8 and 4/5 ounces, 250 grams, of Zwieback, hardtack, Zwieback, hartcakes, or Knäckebrot, about 9/10 of an ounce, 25 grams, of coffee substitute, about 9/10 of an ounce, 25 grams of salt. Everything was sealed airtight. Shelf life, up to 3 years. On paper, it was brilliant. Compact, calorie-dense, built to last. One Eiserner ration delivered roughly 2,200 calories, enough to get through one full day in extreme conditions. But this is where German engineering ran into a limit that no laboratory had accounted for: the physics of materials in extreme cold. Erbswurst wasn't sausage in the usual sense. It was a compressed concentrate, pea flour, pork fat, bacon, salt, onion. Its density was like a bar of soap. To make soup, you had to 1. Bring about 1 pint, half a liter of water to a boil per serving. 2. Crumble the cylinder with a knife or a bayonet. 3. Simmer for 10 to 15 minutes. Without boiling water, it was just a hard, greasy, inedible mass. Erbswurst was a dry-cured smoked sausage, about 40% fat. Above freezing, it held up perfectly. At -4 degrees Fahrenheit, -20 degrees Celsius, it hardened into something like wood. Zwieback was twice-baked hardtack, moisture content around 5%. In deep cold, it didn't really break. It shattered, but at least you could soften it in your mouth. In the summer of 1942, the system worked flawlessly. Field kitchens, the gulaschkanone, rolled right behind the troops. Twice a day, hot soup or coffee in the morning, canned stew with potatoes in the evening. Soldiers got hot food in their mess tins, ate, washed up and moved on. German rationalism was winning. But this system had a critical vulnerability that no staff officer in Berlin could see. It depended on fire and water. November 23, 1942. Soviet forces closed the ring around Stalingrad. Inside the pocket are roughly 250,000 German and Allied soldiers. Paulus's Sixth Army is counting on air supply. Reichsmarshal Göring personally promises Hitler he will deliver 500 tons of cargo every day. For normal operations, the army needs 800 tons. In reality, on the best days they deliver 100 to 120 tons. More often, 50 to 70 tons. December 1942. The temperature drops to -22 degrees Fahrenheit, -30 degrees Celsius. Blizzards. Winds up to about 45 miles per hour, 20 meters per second. And this is where the system begins a cascading failure. Problem number 1. The destruction of infrastructure. Soviet artillery and aircraft deliberately target field kitchens, fuel depots, and water tanks. The calculation is simple. No kitchens, no hot food. No hot food. Soldiers weaken twice as fast. By early January 1943, less than 30% of the kitchens in the pocket are still operating. The soldiers switch to cold rations, and that's where German engineering suffers a fatal breakdown. From a letter by Corporal Kurt Reiser, 24th Panzer Division, December 15, 1942. My dear Greta, today we received our ration, bread and sausage. But the bread froze so hard it's impossible to bite. We tried to warm it over a fire. It burned on the outside but stayed icy inside. The sausage can't be cut. The knives go dull. Müller broke 2 front teeth trying to bite through a piece of hardtack. I don't feel hunger anymore, only cold and exhaustion. Problem number 2. The physics of materials. At -4 degrees Fahrenheit, -20 degrees Celsius, something happens that no Reich laboratory had planned for. Kommissbrot freezes solid in 15 minutes. Try to bite it, and you risk breaking a tooth. Animal fat sets into hard wax. The body can't digest it without warming it first. It passes through the gut without delivering calories. Erbswurst turns into an ice-cold cylinder, dense as stone. Crumbling it with bare hands is impossible. Even with a knife, it takes enormous effort. Soldiers try to cut Erbswurst with bayonets. The blades slip off. Hands go numb from freezing in 2 minutes without gloves. Some try to chew frozen bread. The result: cracked teeth, frostbitten lips and tongues, bleeding gums from scurvy. From a letter by Obergefreiter Helmut Weiner, 305th Infantry Division, December 28, 1942. Yesterday, I ate a piece of bread the size of my fist. That is all I have eaten in 2 days. There is no water. We try to melt snow, but there isn't enough firewood. The pea soup has turned into a green stone. I put it under my shirt to warm it with body heat. After an hour it got softer, but it's impossible to eat. Raw lard and frozen peas. I can no longer stand without support. Problem number 3. Fuel shortage. There's no firewood in the steppe. Coal is flown in, but there is catastrophically not enough of it. Soldiers burn everything that will burn. Furniture from ruined houses, wooden ammunition crates, documents, books. But starting a fire in the wind at -22 degrees Fahrenheit, -30 degrees Celsius, is a near impossible task. And even if you have a fire, there's no water. Water in the pocket freezes in 10 minutes. The Volga River is controlled by Soviet forces. That leaves snow. To get about 1 pint, half a litre, of water, you have to melt about 1 1/3 gallons, 5 litres, of snow. That takes 20 to 30 minutes and an enormous amount of fuel. And the snow is contaminated. Ash, blood, excrement, chemicals. Drink it without boiling it. And you get dysentery and death within a week. From a letter by Lieutenant Friedrich Breyer, 44th Infantry Division, January 8th, 1943. Mom, I don't know whether this letter will get through. I have 3 rations in my bag: bread, sausage, canned food. But I can't eat them. No fire, no water. My hands don't obey me anymore. Yesterday, Hans died in his sleep. We found an untouched Eisner ration in his pocket. He simply couldn't open it. His fingers were frostbitten. I understand now. You can die of hunger with a full rucksack of food. And here the perfect trap snaps shut. A soldier is holding 3,000 calories in his hands. But to eat them, he needs to start a fire, find fuel, melt about 1 1/3 gallons, 5 litres of snow, bring the water to a boil, crumble the frozen sausage, cook the soup, and not get killed by a sniper or a shell fragment during those 40 minutes. All of that takes about an hour of time, firewood, a mess tin, a knife, and a safe place. In an encirclement, under constant mortar fire, at -22 degrees Fahrenheit, -30 degrees Celsius. It's impossible, and then something begins that no German engineer ever planned for, starving to death with a full rucksack of provisions. So what do we see? An engineering catastrophe that killed 250,000 men more quietly than any artillery. The German supply system was designed perfectly for the kind of war the Germans knew how to fight. A fast war, mobile forces, field kitchens rolling behind the tanks. It worked for 80 years, from the Franco-Prussian War to Blitzkrieg. But the Germans failed to account for 2 variables: the vastness of Russia and -22 degrees Fahrenheit, -30 degrees Celsius. In extreme cold, the physical assumptions the entire system was built on stopped holding. Fat can't be digested, water won't boil without fuel, food turns to stone. This is the story of how a perfect system collapses when it collides with a reality no one planned for, and of how engineering can kill more efficiently than weapons, simply by refusing to work at the critical moment. 250,000 soldiers paid for that mistake with their lives, slowly, in hunger, with full rucksacks of food. If you noticed any inaccuracies, or if you can add to the facts, write in the comments. Like the video if you found it interesting. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. See you on the other bank of history.